Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on dungeon mastering.
And I'm one of your hosts, DM Neal, aka Jote Maniac. And today we have a very special guest, someone whose work I have followed for a very long time. And come to find out, someone whose sensibilities match up with my own in a very specific way, but you'll find out how in the rest of the episode, because we have Keith Amman, who is the Emmy Award-winning writer of The Monsters Know What They're Doing. And if you don't know what that is, go right now. Just go to the show notes, go there, learn, come back, listen to the episode, and learn some more. Because today we're going to be talking specifically about making smarter monsters. And in its own way, it's almost being smarter about making monsters. I don't know. It's just a great discussion about a more nuanced approach to how you make monsters, choose monsters for your campaign, for your world, for your story. And it's just a great discussion between Derrick, myself, and Keith. Well, that's enough for me. I'm too excited. Let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meat?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys.
And today on The Meat, we are super excited to talk to Keith Amman. He is an Emmy Award-winning writer based in Chicago. He's the author of the blog, The Monsters Know What They're Doing, which informed the first book that he wrote, The Monsters Know What They're Doing. Those How Not the DM listeners will recognize Keith as one of my guests on my previous show. He's continued that series with several more advice books on D&D, including the upcoming title, Making Enemies, Monster Design Inspiration for Tabletop Role-Playing Games. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, just the kind of, a little bit of introduction, a little bit of what the listeners might be interested in.
Well, I mean, I think you pretty much covered it.
True.
I have been writing The Monsters Know What They're Doing since 2016. Saga Press published The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Combat Tactics for Dungeon Masters, as well as the follow-up books, Live to Tell the Tale, which was Combat Tactics for Players, More Monsters Know What They're Doing, and How to Defend Your Lair. So it's been a few years since How to Defend Your Lair. I've been trying to get this other one out for a while now, and it's finally here. Very, very happy this one's finally hitting the market.
Yeah. And speaking of, and that leads us perfectly into our next question is, can you tell us a little bit more about the book that's about to hit those shelves? And I mean, the way we do frame the question is there anything that you're currently working on that you can tell us about? Those pesky NDAs.
I am actually in between book projects right now, but that's partly because I just finished writing another one. I would be happy to talk about it if I actually had a signed contract in hand yet. But as of this recording, I don't. I am hoping to very, very, very soon. And I think it's something that people will be excited to know is coming. But right at this second, I'm kind of trying to figure out what's next. But the long and the short of Making Enemies is that I've been reverse engineering monsters for a long time, for The Monsters Know What They're Doing, trying to figure out how did the designers intend this to be used? What implications exist in the stat block that maybe they didn't intend, but are there nonetheless? How do you navigate around using this particular monster in a combat encounter? What do you need to know before you run that encounter so that you can save yourself cognitive load at the table and so forth? And for this one, I'm taking the engineering more in the forward direction. So taking all the stuff that I've learned from reverse engineering the monsters, I'm looking at, okay, how do you build a monster when you have an idea? But also, where do you get the ideas from? How do you generate the ideas? How do you take an intention whether it's an intention to challenge your players a certain way or tell a certain kind of story or just plug a hole somewhere and then come up with the monster that fills that hole.
Okay, I don't want to jump the gun. I feel I was ready to just jump too far. I was ready to jump straight into the episode. I know we got one more question, so I'll hold my questions for a moment. But I got two prepared. So for our surprise question, which is always super fun because it's always a surprise to at least one of us, and we all have to answer the question: what is the first monster, the first like TTRPG monster that like you remember facing? Like the one that stands out to you is like, I remember rolling dice against that monster.
It wasn't published
Mm-hmm.
because going all the way back in time to the first D&D group that I played with regularly, it was almost all homebrew. Not just the adventures, the stories, the locations, but in many cases, the monsters themselves. And the first adventure I played in with this group was run by my friend Julian, still a good close friend of mine. Very, very fertile imagination. Long story short, the main creature that we encountered in that game was this enormous primordial plant creature sort of thing. Maybe plant creature, maybe fungus creature. We were never really fully clear on what it was, but it was ancient, it was enormous, and the first quote unquote creatures we encountered were not actually creatures at all. They were part of this superorganism. They were these kind of teardrop shaped, pearly white, four-legged things that we just saw walking in an endless line up a stream bed. And we had no idea what they were. We were trying to discern what they were. They were very alien looking. And it turned out that they were part of this over creature. They were something akin to its white blood cells.
That's super cool.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that sticks in your memory.
Very cool.
Wow. Yeah. I feel like it harkens back to a time where a lot of things used to be homebrew. And it is a thing that comes up a lot here on the podcast where I realize sometimes things that aren't in books just won't happen. Like people need things to be written down and codified in a certain way now more than used to happen. So it's really cool that that's the first thing, like that's the one that stands out. I mean, mine asking the question like reverse engineered a bunch of things for me because I didn't realize what my answer was about to be. But I remember in 3.5, I think I can pull which book it's from. It's Puzzles and Mazes. But one of the things that stands out to me, it's one of the best books from 3.5. It still holds true now because puzzles and mazes still work. It doesn't matter when it is. You can still use those. But it was the Displacer Beast because it was in a hedge maze. And it could use its tentacles through the hedge maze because it's just a bush. And so then it was and I think it kind of goes back to the topic at hand. It was using what it knew to be where it lived to the best of its abilities because the PCs went into its home and it knew, okay, I can displace, I can move, I can jump, I can, shoot a tentacle through here. They can't just stab a sword. They can't just cast a spell. They can't just do these things. And so it just stood out to me of like, okay, this is what it means. It's not just a bag of hit points. Like this is a monster that is doing something more than I was expecting. So, and the Displacer Beast became my favorite monster from that point moving forward. I've read like the book that inspired it originally, Voyage of the Space Beagle. Like I've gone way too deep on the monster itself. But now that I've asked the question, I have answered many additional questions.
So The first time I played was Lost Mine of Phandelver, so I'm going to skip that. That's the boring answer. Clark was scary, but the most memorable monster encounter, I'm just going to twist your words here a little bit, Neal, for me was my friend Matthew homebrewing a kraken that lived in this subterranean lake underneath this giant magical city, which had collapsed, eons ago. And it had swallowed one of the stones that this civilization used to power the floating city, to make it float. And so the kraken had the ability to float out of the water and fly around. And he homebrewed a couple of other kind of like psychic special abilities that it could do based on its, time apart from everything else and time being stuck in this cave. And so that was really fun. I ended up inside it at one point as my character, and I had created like a duplicate of myself. And so I swapped spots with my duplicate at the last second before I was about to die from its stomach acid. It was a lot of fun.
As long as you didn't swap with another character, I think you're okay.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to throw anybody else under the bus. I'm not that kind of player usually. When I do get to play, I try to be as collaborative as possible. But yeah, it was a ton of fun. Okay, so from my very first time sitting in the DM chair, I had started homebrewing monsters because I saw that as kind of like part of the fun of the game was, I see the pattern of the stat blocks, therefore I could make my own, right? And I could make it kind of do what I want when I want. So yeah, Keith, what in particular has drawn you to creating smarter, more engaging, more interesting enemies, more interesting monsters to face?
Well, I was actually on another podcast, Mastering Dungeons, by Teos Abadia and Sean Merwin.
Yeah.
They at one point described me as a monster designer, and I stopped them and said, well, I've designed a few monsters for homebrew side quests and whatnot, but I don't really think of myself as a monster designer.
Uh-huh.
And they said, oh, well, we would be really interested in finding out what your approach to monster design was. And
yeah,
that got me thinking. And when I was looking for topics for a follow-up to How to Defend Your Lair, I thought, well, maybe this is the thing I take on next. Because I didn't want to just put out a book of monsters. I have sort of the teaching gene in me. I don't want to just shovel content at people.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help them do what they're doing better.
You want to teach them to fish.
Yeah. So I don't want to just design a bunch of monsters. The monsters know what they're doing began in large part as an exercise for myself as I tried to understand what at the time was missing in my combat encounters. And so it was a learning process for me, and I was bringing my audience along for the ride. In a very real sense, that is what this is too. This is me exploring all of the aspects of monster design that are interesting to me, and once again, bringing my readership along for the ride. So that's pretty much where it came from. Also, it came from inflation eating into my book sales.
Yeah,
and
very valid.
Thinking, boy, there's going to be a period of time here where I'm going to need to have something to fill a gap. I'd better figure out what that thing is going to be. And also, there was the OGL fiasco. And when that happened, a lot of people were asking themselves, is D&D something I want to continue with? And not everybody was answering that question the same way.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if I want to maintain my readership, I have to provide something for people who are still playing D&D and also for people who are choosing to play other systems. So I needed to be, I'm not going to use the word system agnostic. I describe the approach that I've taken as system ecumenical.
Hey, there you go.
Nice.
So I'm talking in general principles, and I'm giving specific examples in D&D, but also in Pathfinder, Shadowdark, the Cypher System, and Call of Cthulhu, which are several other very popular systems that people might want to apply these ideas to.
There's so much that aligns with, I think, a lot of how we approach this podcast, in the sense that if we wanted to, like, our goal has always been to keep as many episodes as evergreen as possible. There are certain aspects that don't survive time. That's just true of many things. But like, the ultimate goal is that someone could listen to an episode from 5 to 7 years ago and gain just as much as someone that listened to it 5 to 7 days from its release. Like, that's the point of most of this. And like, just going through your material, like, that's the thing, is like, you can, I mean, the fish analogy, as much as I love to play with analogies, but the point is, like, the things that you gain from reading the books is like the tools to continue to make, not like, okay, I had this monster, but now it's 2024. I don't necessarily have that monster anymore. Now it's 2030. Do I get to use that monster anymore? I don't know. Maybe. And maybe it's fine. And maybe I stay in, maybe I don't do anything. And maybe I'm a group that stays in 2014 for the next 30 years and I don't move on. And that's totally possible. There is also the very real chance that that's not true. And I moved to 3 different systems between here and there. But if I have the right tool set, it doesn't matter, because then I can keep utilizing those tools each time I move and do the same thing over and over again. If anything, it gives me the ability to actually use the same monster in an engaging way each time I have to move forward.
Do you feel like, Keith, that this work in practicing and kind of like digging down into what it takes to build and design an interesting monster is kind of scratching that itch you were looking for? Is it as interesting a challenge as you hoped it would be?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was very, very hard work and very time consuming writing this book, but I also kind of had a blast doing it, because it challenged me to push myself to think in new directions, to come up with new ideas. I kind of set as a goal for myself, I want this to include 20 brand new monsters. And I think I did it. Let me let me count what I've got here. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I got 20. So
nice. Now, we're not asking you to give away all of the secrets. Obviously, we want people to go out and check out the book, as Neal and I will. But were there any kind of like main guiding principles you found in your work, and maybe on the other side of the coin, any kind of major pitfalls that seem to happen a lot when setting out to do design work like this?
Those are two sides of the same coin, and they relate to the question of what a monster is. How do you define a monster? And the definition that I settled on, which is my own definition, maybe other people's definitions overlap with this one, but this is the one I arrived at myself. That a monster is defined by being 3 things. It is unfamiliar, it is dangerous, and it is unnatural. So, something can be unfamiliar and dangerous, but still natural, like just a mean predator in an area you haven't explored. That doesn't make that predator a monster. It makes it dangerous and unfamiliar, and you want to familiarize yourself real quick with what you're going to do about it. But it's not a monster per se. It's not a subject for fantasy. Something might be unfamiliar and unnatural, but not dangerous. Well, then it poses no threat. So why do you care? It's an object of interest, but it's not something that you need to overcome. And then something might be dangerous and even unnatural, but not unfamiliar. If you've already got the script for how to deal with it, then it's just an everyday problem to solve. So you really need all three of those ingredients to make something into an actual monster. And that holds true even if your quote unquote monster is a humanoid NPC, because to qualify as a monster, they have to be dangerous to you. They have to be doing something that you haven't run across previously.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be something weird. It's got to be something that is, in a way, sort of anti-human to make it unnatural. That's when it goes from being just evil to being monstrous.
I love the context of the familiarity, because I butt up against that a lot at my table, because the players I have been playing longer than I have, and I have been playing for a while. And so their level of familiarity with a lot of monsters is very high, and it makes so much more sense with that context that those don't feel as monstrous anymore, because it's rote.
Right.
It's memorization. Right. It's ... This showed up. I do this. It is dead. And it's like, well, okay. And yeah, so it's not, you don't have that same surprise. You don't have that same back and forth. You don't have that same, okay, what do I do?
Years ago, I took a college English course in literature of fantasy and magic. And there was a portion of that class that was dedicated to horror. And one of the things that I will always carry with me from that class is that the essence of horror was defined as ignorance. You don't know what you're dealing with. That is where the fear comes from. Not knowing what your enemy is, not knowing what it wants, not knowing how to defend yourself from it, and not knowing when you are actually safe. Everything you don't know makes it scarier. And when you start to fill in those blanks and answer those questions, it ceases to be as scary. Now, you might want that as part of the journey of overcoming that monster. You figure it out and you find within yourself the resources to overcome it, and you become strong against it. And that's how you overcome it. But you have to make sure that that is happening in a way that is bringing the reader along on a journey of empowerment along with the protagonist. You know what I mean? Because if you give that stuff away too early, it loses the tension. It loses the scariness. And I think that for a monster to be interesting to encounter, in most cases, it needs to have, even if you're not actually playing a horror game, it needs to have that measure of unfamiliarity to make it work. Going back to that first group that I played with, we rotated who was in the DM seat. And when it came my turn, I said, I'm going to do something a little different here. And I ran each of the other three players through a brief solo encounter before I brought them all back together for the main adventure. And one of the members of the group was playing an elf fighter and a wood elf fighter. And I had him and some NPCs go up against a troll. But I never used the word troll. I described it physically. I said what it did. I described what happened when they attacked it and lopped off its limbs. But I never actually said, you're fighting a troll, or it's the troll's turn. The troll is up next. Never said troll. It was just, this is the thing you're fighting, and you have to figure out how to deal with it. And the player said that it was fantastic. He loved it. He loved not knowing.
I came up on an episode recently where, and I am disappointed in myself for not remembering exactly which one. Listener, go back to that episode. But the idea of doing that and allowing them to name it, that their experience, the true unknown, that they are experiencing this for the first time. And based on their interaction with that monster, what do you call it? Like after this harrowing experience and this successful battle, and you come back and you're telling the tale, or is it a bard NPC, or is it whoever? But like, what is your name for this creature moving forward? And let's add that to the world. The moving forward, that is what the people of this world call that monster. Because why not?
I mean, who would know better than you?
Yeah.
The ones who live to tell the tale.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
All right. So when we are working on and, prepping and designing our own games, what are kind of like the steps that you suggest one would take in working on the design of a new monster?
So it's not necessarily a step-by-step thing. And if you try to use the chapters in this book as a map in that way, like I must do chapter 1, then I must do chapter 2, then I must do chapter 3, it's not designed to work that way. The different chapters are simply different areas of exploration for ideas. So, but the first chapter is the fundamentals. What level are the PCs? And therefore, what kind of problems are they tackling? And I basically go by D&D tier, but I break tier 1 up into 2 levels. And I refer to those as first foes and neighborhood bullies. So at like level 1 and 2 in D&D, you're fighting the first foes. At 3 and 4, you're fighting the neighborhood bullies. And then level 5 to 10 is threats to the kingdom, also known as national security risks. Levels 11 through 16 are saving the world. At this point, you are world-renowned heroes. And if something actually threatens the world, you are equipped to take it on. And then once you get up to 17 through 20, tier 4, this is what I refer to as cosmic conflict. Those different names are meant to evoke the kind of enemy you're fighting. A neighborhood bully problem is fundamentally different from a cosmic conflict problem. And I also talk about size and number, because those tell different stories. If you have fewer monsters or more monsters than you have player characters in the party, if they are smaller or larger than the player characters are, those all tell different kinds of stories. You might have small and many. That's a vermin invasion narrative. Small and few. That is either an easy problem or a harbinger, or maybe an unexpected something that punches above its weight.
Yeah.
Large and many. This is the problem that is too big for you to solve all at once. You have to be patient and careful and take your time and basically wage a guerrilla war in order to win this. If you think of the first campaign of Critical Role, the Chroma Conclave.
That's exactly what I was
subplot.
thinking.
Yep. That is, pick them off one by one.
That is large and many.
Yep.
You have to take it slow. You have to use everything you've got. You have to break the problem into smaller problems that you can tackle. I talk about terrain and habitat and how that affects the physical capabilities of a predator, because an Arctic predator is just built different from a forest predator, which is built different from a desert predator, which is built different from a coastal predator. They all have their own sets of traits that make them effective hunters in those different types of terrain. So those are some of the fundamentals that I discuss. But then there are also things Like, what kind of tactical stunts can they pull? What kind of story are you trying to tell with any given creature type? You know, are you using this monster as a metaphor for something? Because throughout history, monsters have been metaphors for the social problems that people have found themselves confronted with.
Sure, like St. George and the Dragon, you know, or I don't know, Grendel, or any of these could be, yeah, metaphors for various different things.
Yeah, what kind of magic will your creature employ, if any? What kinds of weaknesses or quirks should you give it? How will the player characters go about finding out what those weaknesses are, besides just trial and error, which is one option. But, you know, it's nice sometimes to reward the players who say, I'm going to go to the archives and see if I can find a book that tells us more about this creature. You know,
Classic.
that's a rare and precious gift, and you should reward it when you get that. You know, give them a gift back.
I'll say all the gifts. If the first player to do that at my table is getting inspiration, advantage, crisp high five, everything, everything.
My players are always trying to research.
$20 bill.
We must have different player groups. Mine are always trying to research. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I paid it off one time and now they expect it, you know? Anyway.
Another piece, because I've seen inside the book. I will say, first and foremost, my favorite page is number 415. Hands down. Without a shadow of doubt. I will leave it there and I will let you look at it. Hands down. Favorite page. Thank you. It's 415. And you're not changing my mind about it. Okay. That's it. We're going to leave that fun little surprise there. Listener, you should absolutely get this book and you should go see why 415 is my favorite page. But it's in a section that I think is like really stood out to me, because it's what I am drawn to probably the most about monster design and doing things is, and one of the things that we kind of gear the podcast to the most is when you're not developing something for mass market, you're developing it for the market that is your table. And like, so you only need it to work for the individuals that are sitting at your table each time. And so one of the things is like, what are some of the guiding principles for customizing monsters specifically just for your table?
Well, for starters, again, you have to begin with your goal. You have to ask, are you trying to give all your PCs a chance to shine here? Or are you trying to redress an imbalance? For example, if you have one player who has been hogging the spotlight and all the other players have been letting that player's character hog the spotlight, and so they're pulling all the weight and everyone's like, yeah, we're just along for the ride. And it's starting to become less fun. So you want to find a way to create a monster that your spotlight hog is not the one who's best equipped to deal with, that they can try, but all of their go-to abilities are going to bounce off this thing. And now the other players, the other characters have to step up and show what they can do to take on this monster or this group of monsters. You might want to do it the other way around. There might be just one player who's been getting short shrift again and again and again, and you want to give them a moment to shine. You want to create a monster that it's going to be a handful for the party overall, but this particular character has what it takes to come through in the clutch. Or it might be a situation where your PCs have been taking a beating and you just want to give them a breather. You want to give them an easy win, something they can recharge their batteries off of. Or you might want to be taking the campaign in a more thematic direction. And maybe your PC's activities have been trending in the direction of certain kinds of stories, and you want to build on that and put a twist on it. And so you want to create monsters that are the PC's shadow in one way or the other, that represent something antithetical to them. And you want to pit the two against each other. These are all some of the reasons why you might want to customize a monster for your particular party. And then from there, you zoom in on what particular features and traits and abilities and so forth they have. You decide which ones am I going to neutralize, which ones am I going to make this monster vulnerable to, and go from there.
Yeah, the shadow portion was the part that like stuck out to me the most as something that I really, really want to start implementing at my own table. Also, I have a love-hate relationship with the idea that you gave me another YouTube channel to subscribe to, which isn't a thing I had a problem with. I mean, well, no, that's not the right way to say that. That's a thing I have a problem with, and I didn't need help with that problem. But now I'm going to definitely be subscribed to Lessons from the Screenplay because you hooked me. So the idea of using, and I think this is what it boils down to, is realizing that monsters have the ability to be more. I mean, that's a very simple version of all of this conversation, but they have the ability to be so much more. And the idea of leveraging them to create or shift the narrative is something I feel like I've been missing, or like I've been so close to, but not really honing in on. And I think the shadow element has been a thing that like I'm definitely going to start using a lot more to guide certain aspects of the campaign by using certain monsters in specific ways to, like you said, either reward and go down paths that I can see my players. And in the reverse may be true, where like, are they going down a path that you're like, oof, this isn't necessarily where I'm thinking the campaign needs to go. I kind of need it to shift in this direction. What are some monsters that I could use, and what are the tactics that they could employ that could shift this in a different direction to get the campaign maybe back on track in the way that I need it to? Or like you said, a tonal or thematic shift based on employing monsters that have that tone and that theme.
Mm-hmm. And another thing I go into in chapter 1, which I mentioned briefly a moment ago, but kind of glossed over, is that I believe that every D&D creature type and those types analogs in other systems are best suited to telling particular kinds of stories. For example, if you want to tell stories about politics and religion, then use humanoids, because humanoids are the only creature type that is explicitly social. And those are social concerns. Those are matters of social conflict. If you want to talk about compulsions that people can't let go of, that is a particular kind of story that undead are especially good for. If you want to talk about the nature of evil and people's responses to it, you want to use fiends. If you want to talk about social rules that you have to figure out as you go, and that you might, kind of be punished for getting wrong, those are phase stories and so forth. So knowing what kind of story you want to tell will steer you toward certain creature types if you're aware of those relationships.
So Keith, we thought we would take some time here just before our homework section to put this to work. We're going to lift some mental weights, if you would. So let's use some of these tables that you've got in your book to kind of build a situation, and then use that information to build ourselves either one or many monsters that we might use in a situation like this. So lead us off with the first table, Neal. Do you want to roll the die on that?
Well, we will state, so this is a perfectly named set of tables, help me make up my mind with an exclamation point. Cause I kind of feel like this is the scenario where you're at the 11th hour and you've decided I need to make up my mind, exclamation point. So I will roll a D20. And then Keith, if you let me know what we get. Oh, I got a natural 20 to kick us off. I feel like that's bad.
Natural 20, if I remember correctly, is that's large and many.
Wait, no, it's not.
Oh, yeah.
It's not bad. I forgot. We're making the monsters. This is great. I'm back in.
Yeah, as a DM GM, this is really fun. Yeah.
Sorry, players.
Page 30 level of challenge is a D12.
I got a D12 and I got a 2.
All right, so this is hilarious because these are first foes.
Okay.
So large and many, but first foes. So what we're looking at here is a very interesting scenario. This is one of your first forays out into adventuring, but you're confronted with a situation that looks too big for you to handle.
Yeah.
How are you going to handle it? How are you going to break this into smaller problems that you can handle?
I know what
I'm
interesting. Thinking, but yeah, I know what I'm thinking. But Keith, what are you thinking off the top of your head?
I don't know. I'm still. That's as far as I've gotten. I'm going to go a little farther. On page 120, we have a D20 for habitat.
I got a 15.
Mountain.
Okay, interesting.
So let's look at some things about mountain creatures. All right, so first of all, it gets cold at high altitudes. So mountain-dwelling mammals tend to have thick coats of fur, offering them natural protection equivalent to hide armor. So let's just start with that. We're looking at something kind of Bigfoot-like. Maybe to make this unfamiliar and unnatural, maybe these mountain creatures have come down out of the mountains and they are menacing some kind of settlement in the foothills.
They're eating sheep. They're doing something like that. Yeah.
There are too many of them.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, how do we want to frame this story? That's where the creature types come in. We could say they're some kind of giants.
Yeah.
Which then would be a story about emphasizing how insignificant people feel in the face of this outsized threat. But they might just be brutal predators that are messy killers. That might make them a monstrosity. Or if they're a little bit less malevolently brutal, maybe a beast. But if the malevolence is there and measurable, then you're looking at a monstrosity. So there are certain kinds of creature types that are not at all appropriate for this. For example, dragons, because a dragon is a story about a uniquely dangerous individual with a very distinctive personality. So that's not something we want. We probably want to go more in the giants or monstrosity direction, especially for first foes. They all right, so they've got shaggy hair, they've got thick skin, and they're tough. There are lots of them. So I think at this level, you probably don't want to bring magic into the mix just yet. Let the PCs have the magic here. I don't know if you necessarily need to get metaphorical with it at this level. Oh, but I have a chapter here called Stop Does Not Equal Kill.
True.
And this is where I include stuff like doing research to find their weaknesses, denaturing the monster, by which I mean taking one of the things that defines it as a monster, its unfamiliarity, its unnaturalness, its danger, and undoing that. So if you can get these creatures, for example, to go back to the mountain which is the natural place where they live, that is one way of solving the problem. You don't necessarily have to kill them. You just make them not monstrous for you anymore.
That kind of hits on something I was thinking, that it's not necessarily, in my head, it wasn't just as much as like eating the sheep as it was the destructive nature about obtaining the sheep. Because if they're these creatures that live in the mountains are open, they're caves, or there's no natural structures for them or an understanding necessarily of structure.
Maybe they tore the whole pen apart to get at the sheep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Fences, pins, buildings. I break them. The sheep are in there. And so if you're releasing them or sending them into the mountains or doing something else, but yeah, I think that destructive nature is the thing that's also setting it apart, because it's not the predators that the townsfolk understand, because the predators would take a sheep.
They understand a pack of wolves, but this is something different.
I also like the idea of them being tough, being the thing that stands out as the difficulty nature. Like you said, not implementing magic or anything like that, allowing that to be for the players, but just having, is it system? What was the term used? It just slipped my mind.
Ecumenical.
There, yeah.
System ecumenical,
where it's
yes.
like, okay, is it damage reduction? Is it higher armor class? Is it just whatever equates to effective health? Like they are just able, is it just a big old bag of hit points? Whatever it means, but they are harder to take down. I like that being the kind of they're just staying power. They're tough. And you find that out very quickly. And it's clear that they're tough because do you watch them just Kool-Aid Man through something and it's seemingly unfazed?
And I think they need to have a weakness, because the weakness is the means by which the PCs are going to find themselves able to deal with these threats. For example, there is something about them that makes it possible to lure one away from the others. Okay, there's now a way for you to break the big problem into smaller problems. Something about them. Not sure what yet. Don't have to be sure yet. This will come in time. The more we think about it and play with it like a ball of clay, it'll eventually come together. One thing, actually, though, that is very, very important to answer from the get-go: what system are we doing this for?
Right.
Because, okay, sure, you're doing it for your home table, but what is your home table playing? Maybe your home table is playing Shadowdark. The mechanical approach you take to implementing this concept in Shadowdark is going to differ from the one that you use to make a D&D monster or a Pathfinder monster. But a good rule of thumb, if you're playing D&D, is what's its proficiency bonus? Give it that many unusual features. I have to tip my hat to Chris S. Sims, who suggested that relationship to me. So this particular creature, which is a first foe, it's going to have a proficiency bonus of only 2. Even now, it's not going to be higher than like challenge rating 2, which is still going to be a tremendous handful for starting PCs, but it's doable if they can break it up. So they're going to have proficiency bonus 2. That means they're going to have, let's say, 1 memorable means of attack and 1 memorable means of defense. And we'll want to decide what those things are. And they should be something that highlights the nature that we've decided they possess.
Yeah, all of this has made me kind of think maybe it's like a bunch of young of some sort of species that lives in these mountains that lost parents and are just kind of like foraging and figuring out how to find food, like a bunch of, I don't know, giant bird babies. And so that's why they're so large, is because they come from a species that is huge, but they are just kind of young and figuring it out. So that could be also why it's easy to lure them away, is they're inexperienced, they're not used to being tricked or bamboozled or whatever. You can kind of mess around with them that way. They're not sure how to deal with other things hunting them or ambushing them. They're just used to plowing through and getting what they want.
or just being given what they want by their parents who are now out of the picture. And this absence is causing them to behave in an unnatural way.
Uh-huh.
And that hits on one of the potentially most fun narratives that I like using on occasion. Can't use it all the time. Dear adventurer, did you not understand the repercussions of the actions you chose and didn't kind of do any follow-up on what you did because you killed the parents and didn't check on anything else that would happen? Like, you know, because there's echoes of these choices. Like, there's an anime called Rising the Shield Hero where one of the things, like, one hero is like following behind some of the others to just kind of clean up the mess. Because it's like, yeah, you killed this dragon, but you left basically a colossal carcass in this town. And now it is corrupting the entire town because there's just a giant dead body. You can't. It doesn't work this way. You need to do more. I get that you saved the town, but then you doomed it to a different death because you didn't do the next thing. You just moved away and you just went on to the next dragon.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And that character is very much a you're welcome character. But I'm thinking that same concept here where it's like, okay, you took out these, these higher level adventurers, took out these huge or colossal or something like that. And now the echoes of that are the current PC's problem.
Yep. Well, Keith, we would love to chat about homework that you can think of. Maybe this is like movies to watch, stuff to read, shows to watch, YouTube channels, etc. that will get people in that headspace that you feel like is most productive when you are working on designing your own creatures.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
You can take your inspiration from anywhere.
True.
Anywhere.
Yes.
One of the monsters in this group was inspired by a storefront that I drove past that had a super weird name.
Huh.
One of them was inspired by a typo on a restaurant menu.
No way.
One of them was inspired by watching a couple of Gen Zers do a reaction video to a John Denver song.
What song was it?
I already saw that one. This is one of the first times on the podcast where I've I feel compelled to just shout the word preach right now. I'm so excited. Please continue.
Well, and some of them, one of the monsters, actually the one that I love the most, the one I am most attached to, is one where I suddenly had a bolt of inspiration strike me after my 6-year-old kid told me I should make a particular kind of monster. And suddenly I knew exactly what I wanted it to be based on the description. And so it can come from anywhere. You don't have to watch particular kinds of media or read particular kinds of books. It's just being open to it anytime. Anything that makes you think about the adventures you're writing for in a new way is something to play around with. And, if it's not working, it's not working. Throw it away and try again. The world is full of things that you can take and use as inspiration. Just give yourself permission, man.
I like it. I feel like you can scroll, you can flip through the monster manual and you can pinpoint a few where you're like, hey, wait a sec, that their names are escaping me, but the frog demons, where one of them yes, Slot is. It's just okay, so this is Alien, this is obviously a chest burster, or I don't know. There's a bunch of other examples, but I love the advice and I definitely take it. I try to, or not try to, but when I am consuming media, I'm constantly hey, that is a cool story idea, or hey, that is an interesting, encounter idea or monster idea, and I feel like that's what keeps it fresh. Because your players aren't going to have consumed all the same media you have, right? That's the beauty of it. You can reskin just about anything and make it fun.
Now, the one thing I will say is if you want to go down the road of making metaphorical monsters, then you might want to read up on a little bit of monster theory, which is an actual thing now that exists in humanities departments. Stephen T. Asma's On Monsters is a very good place to start. I actually quote Asma quite a bit in my chapter on monsters as metaphors. There are others, but that is the one I would recommend everyone start with. Yeah, and just sort of like explore what other people have had to say about that sort of thing. But yeah, beyond that, there's no homework. Just think about what fits. Think about what fits. Think about what kind of story you want to tell and go from there.
Yep. This is why they make pocket-sized Moleskines. It is why I have one. I literally take it with me most places. If I know I can be distracted enough to just stop my day and write something down. But it is the only one that I legitimately wrote down. Like, if you find this, I will give you $100 to give it back to me, because it's where I write.
In the notebook.
Yeah, because it's where I write most of my, it says RPG ideas on the front of it. It's where I write most of my stuff down. It pops into my head. It fits in my back pocket. It is super jacked up because I do that and I forget about it and I sit down on it a lot. It has a very weird shape now, but that's what I do with it, because I know myself. I will not look back at my digital notes in my phone. I won't. I have thought to myself that that's something I will do. And for the most part, it is in fact not something that I will do. And I have adapted to that fact. And so I carry a physical notebook and I physically write it down, because and there's psychology behind this fact. The physical act of writing it down is something different than typing it out with your thumbs. That's just just the reality.
Very true.
Now, I will say, like, if I want to toss out some actual physical homework, something that I think that I might try and do, because I see it often when I look up a monster and I want to kind of do some research about it. If it's an episode that we're doing and I want to look at the historical nature behind what is a monster done through, let's say, every edition of D&D. That's a thing that can show you a lot about monster design. Especially if it's something that's seen all five. If it started in first and saw second, third, fourth, and fifth, go look. What did it look like through all of those? What has changed? What hasn't changed? And just take some time, especially if it's a monster that you enjoy. That's a really fun, that'd be a really fun deep dive as to, like, okay, what does it mean for it to be a monster and what survives 50 years?
This is my homework. You should go look up the original picture of the Beholder and then see how much scarier it is now. That's what it makes me think of, is that original picture. Anyway, Keith, thank you again so much for coming on. We're really excited about your book. We really appreciate you taking some time to chop it up with us and talk about, the philosophies behind designing monsters. But where can people find out more about you, order the book, and everything else that you have going on?
My personal professional website is spyandowl.com. No punctuation or anything in that, just spy and owl. Solid. I have the blog, The Monsters Know What They're Doing, themonstersknow.com, again, solid, which I am still adding to dutifully once a week. I have a newsletter, One Foot in Fairyland, onefootinfairyland.com, and I am on Mastodon and Blue Sky.
Perfect. Well, and as always, we'll have links to all of that in the show notes. I point down like it still matters. I don't. It's an audio only format, and it will never stop pointing down like you can see me.
Speaking of having too many YouTube channels, you're subscribed.
It's because I watch them all, and that's what they do. So I can't help myself. But yeah, again, Keith, we want to thank you.
Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button.
Boom! Exactly. Don't forget to hit that bell. Oh. And don't forget to follow. I know that about 50%. Yeah, see, this is how much I watch. But gross, I know. But Keith, we absolutely will have to have you come back on.
Well, thank you again for inviting me.
We just want to thank Keith again for coming on, spending some time with us, and telling us about how to make smarter monsters. And of course, if you want to email us and tell us about how you've been adding smarter monsters or how you've been using Keith's material in your own game, you can always email us at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode or any of the others, head over to iTunes, technically Apple Podcasts, or your podcatcher of choice. Leave us a rating and a review because it makes me happy. I smile. And of course, if you head over to social media, you can typically find us at DMS_block. That's at DMs block. And as always, the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, The Bad Venture Club, and more. But as always, we want to thank you for listening to the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing gods, killing characters, and lowering the egos of everyone else at the table. I'm DM Neal. Good night, good luck, and keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
Don't let him make death saves. Just kill him. It's smart, but it's rude.
Goodbye.